History of Cryptography. Cryptography, the use of codes and ciphers to protect secrets, began thousands of years ago. In the early 20th century, the invention of complex mechanical and electromechanical machines, such as the Enigma rotor machine, provided more sophisticated and efficient means of encryption. The subsequent introduction of electronics and computing has allowed elaborate schemes of still greater complexity, most of which are entirely unsuited to pen and paper. The development of cryptography has been paralleled by the development of cryptanalysis, the breaking of codes and ciphers. The discovery and application early on of frequency analysis to the reading of encrypted communications has, on occasion, altered the course of history. Thus, the Zimmermann telegram triggered the United States' entry into World War I, and Allied reading of Nazi Germany's ciphers shortened World War II, in some evaluations by as much as 2 years. Until the 1960s, secure cryptography was largely the preserve of governments. Two events have since brought it squarely into the public domain: the creation of a public encryption standard, the DES, and the invention of public key cryptography. Antiquity. The earliest known use of cryptography is found in non-standard hieroglyphs carved into the wall of a tomb from the Old Kingdom of Egypt circa 1900 BC. Some clay tablets from Mesopotamia somewhat later are clearly meant to protect information. One dated near 1500 BC was found to encrypt a craftsman's recipe for pottery glaze, presumably commercially valuable. In India, around 400 BC to 200 AD, the Chitta Vikapa, or the art of understanding writing in cipher, and the writing of words in a peculiar way, was documented in the Kama Sutra for the purpose of communication between lovers. Medieval Cryptography. David Kahn notes in The Codebreakers that modern cryptology originated among the Arabs, the first people to systematically document cryptanalytic methods. Al-Khalil wrote the Book of Cryptographic Messages, which contains the first use of permutations and combinations to list all possible Arabic words with and without vowels. The invention of the frequency analysis technique for breaking monoalphabetic substitution ciphers by Al-Kindi, an Arab mathematician, sometime around 8800, proved to be the single most significant cryptanalytic advance until World War II. In early medieval England, between the years 800 to 1100, substitution ciphers were frequently used by scribes as a playful and clever way to encipher notes, solutions to riddles, and colophons. The ciphers tend to be fairly straightforward, but sometimes they deviate from an ordinary pattern, adding to their complexity and possibly also to their sophistication. Cryptography from 1800 to World War II. Although cryptography has a long and complex history, it wasn't until the 19th century that it developed anything more than ad hoc approaches to either encryption or cryptanalysis, the science of finding weaknesses in crypto systems. Cryptography and its misuse were involved in the execution of Mata Hari and Dreyfus's conviction and imprisonment, both in the early 20th century. Cryptographers were also involved in exposing the machinations which had led to the Dreyfus affair. Mata Hari, in contrast, was shot. In 1917, Gilbert Burnham proposed a teleprinter cipher in which a previously prepared key, kept on paper tape, is combined character by character with a plain text message to produce the ciphertext. This led to the development of electromechanical devices as cipher machines and to the only unbreakable cipher, the one-time pad. During the 1920s, Polish naval officers assisted the Japanese military with the code and cipher development. World War II Cryptography. The Enigma machine was widely used by Nazi Germany. Its cryptanalysis by the Allies provided vital ultra-intelligence. Mathematician Marian Rejewski at Poland Cipher Bureau in December 1932 deduced the detailed structure of the German Army Enigma using mathematics and limited documentation supplied by Captain Gustave Bertrand of French military intelligence. The greatest breakthrough in cryptanalysis according to historian David Kahn. Type B cipher machine Purple used by the Japanese Foreign Office from February 1939 to the end of World War II. Magic, a term used by the US referring to the intelligence resulting in cryptanalysis, while Ultra is a term used by the British. Allied cipher machines used in World War II included the British Type X and the American Sigaba. Both were electromechanical rotor designs similar in spirit to the Enigma, albeit with major improvements. Neither is known to have been broken by anyone during the war. Modern cryptography. Encryption in modern times is achieved by using algorithms that have a key to encrypt and decrypt information. Beginning around 1990, the use of the Internet for commercial purposes and the introduction of commercial transactions over the Internet called for a widespread standard for encryption. Before Advanced Encryption Standard (AES), Data Encryption Standard was used. Claude Shannon, considered by many as the father of modern cryptography. Shannon described the two basic types of systems for secrecy: theoretical secrecy, now unconditional security, and practical secrecy, now computational secrecy. The first are those designed with the intent to protect against hackers and attackers who have infinite resources with which to decode a message. The second are those designed to protect against hackers and attacks with finite resources with which to decode message. Shannon's work influenced further cryptography research in the 1970s, as the public key cryptography developers M.E. Hellman and W. Diffie cited Shannon's research as a major influence. His work also impacted modern designs of secret key ciphers. At the end of Shannon's work with cryptography, progress slowed until Hellman and Diffie introduced their paper involving public key cryptography. An encryption standard. The mid 1970s saw two major public, non secret advances. First was the publication of the draft Data Encryption Standard in the U.S. Federal Register on 17 March 1975. The second development in 1976 fundamentally changed the way crypto systems might work. This was the publication by Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman. It introduced a radically new method of distributing cryptographic keys, which went far toward solving one of the fundamental problems of cryptography, key distribution, and has become known as Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Hashing. Hashing is a common technique used in cryptography to encode information, quickly using typical algorithms. Generally, an algorithm is applied to a string of text and the resulting string becomes the hash value. Hash functions can be used to verify digital signatures so that when signing documents via the internet, the signature is applied to one particular individual, much like a handwritten signature. These signatures are verified by assigning the exact hash code to a person.
The basic principle of cryptography. First, encryption. Encryption is to convert the data in some unreadable form. This helps in protecting the privacy while sending the data from sender to receiver. The reverse of encryption is decryption. Encryption means securing digital data using an algorithm that makes the original information unreadable. Next is authentication. In layman's term, authentication ensures that the messages was originated from the originator claimed in the message. For example, Alice sends a message to Bob. Now, gusto ni Bob ng proof nga nag-message jud sa iya kay si Alice. So, authentication is a process of recognizing a user's identity. Third, integrity. One problem that a communication system can face is the loss of integrity of messages being sent from the sender to receiver. The use of cryptography is to ensure that the messages that are being received by the receiver are not altered anywhere in the communication path. This can be achieved by using the concept of cryptographic hash. Cryptographic hash function is a mathematical function that converts a numerical input value into another compressed numerical value. The main use of cryptographic hash function is to verify the authenticity of piece of data. So what happens if Alice sends a message to Bob but denies that she has actually sent a message? Dirin sunod ang non-repudiation. Non-repudiation is the assurance that someone cannot deny the validity of something, the ability to make sure that a person or a party associated with a contract or communication cannot deny the authenticity of their signature over their document or the sending of message. One popular way to achieve this is through the digital signature. Digital signature, combined with other measures, can offer non-repudiation when it comes to online transactions, where it is crucial to ensure that a party to contract or a communication can deny the authenticity of their signature on a document or sending a communication in the first place.
And now let's talk about cryptographic tools. The first tool is Certificate Manager.exe. This is the tool that is defined by Microsoft as the cryptography tool. The file can be installed as it has the exe extension. The file allows you to create and manage the certificate. The cryptography is used extensively in certificate managing. It lets you handle the certification, and in addition to that, it also allows you to manage the certificate revocation list. The purpose of cryptography in certificate generation is to make sure that the data exchange between the parties is secure, and this tool helps us to add the extra bits in security. The second tool is the Docker, the other cryptography tool that is used to practice encryption. The Docker is nothing but a container that allows the user to develop a large application within it. The data that are kept inside the Docker are kept in encrypted form. The mechanism of cryptography has been used very deeply to bring the feature of data encryption. The interesting part about Docker is, in addition to the data, the files are also kept encrypted so that no one without a proper key access could access it. The Docker, in simple terms, is a container that lets the user to hold their critical information and keep it safe so that the entire focus can be on application development. It can also be considered as the cloud storage that lets us handle the data on a shared or dedicated server. So, ang ikatulong tool is the BitLocker. So, most users prefer to use Microsoft's BitLocker software. You can either use it to encrypt a particular disk partition or the entire hard disk. BitLocker is a full disk encryption tool built in the latest Windows operating system, which is on Windows 10, which uses AES, Advanced Encryption Standard, encryption to encrypt data on the drives. The Advanced Encryption Standard has been tested and improved and is now used worldwide by the most security vendors due to its high level of security optimization. Why you should choose BitLocker? So first, it's because it's easy to use and it's already integrated into your Windows operating system, so there's no need to add another encryption software. Second, it's a free data encryption software tool you can use to prevent data breaches and data exfiltration from your hard disk. Third, it encrypts your entire drive, which makes it impossible for malicious actors stealing your laptop to remove the hard drive and access your files. Lastly is when BitLocker drive encryption is activated and you add new files, BitLocker will encrypt them automatically. So however, as an encryption technology built into Microsoft, it's been a target for researchers looking for flaws in popular tools used by people. That's why a researcher was able to find a new, relatively simple way that Windows BitLocker encryption keys can be sniffed in less secure configuration as They travel from trusted platform modules during boot. The fourth tool is the cyber ghost. Another way to hide your online identity is to use a VPN, virtual private network, which can encrypt your communication and keep it safe from constant interception attempts. This private network is able to spread across the normal internet space, using its resources to create an encrypted channel and protect your data from hackers or the prying eyes of others. It uses a strong encryption mechanism to hide your IP address, secure banking transactions, or keep yourself and your information safe when accessing Wi-Fi networks. A VPN software like CyberGhost can be used when trying to connect to unsafe public networks or when needed to access content whose distribution is restricted to a certain geographical area. You can browse in a private mode from another country and get access more than 1,000 servers across 50 plus countries. A popular VPN solution to ensure that your web traffic and valuable information remain encrypted. It is the winner of the Best Value category at the BestVPN.com Awards 2019. It includes a 30-day money-back guarantee for everything else and friendly support. A VPN service provider like CyberGhost helps you keep your data protected and secure your digital assets. CyberGhost works with Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, Linux, or routers.
Okay, I'm going to discuss the major protocols used for secure communications. Diba, if you're making phone calls or sending video calls over your network, you want to be sure that communication is secure, right? And to be able to do that, you might use a secure protocol such as SRTP, that stands for Secure Real-Time Transport Protocol. SRTP is the secure version of the real-time transport protocol that you may have seen with other voice over IP technologies, but it adds encryption using AES to make sure that all the video and audio is confidential as it goes through the network. SRTP also includes authentication integrity and replay protection by including HMAC SHA-1 as a hashing function. With this in place, you know that you are receiving the original audio or video stream and there's nobody sitting in the middle with a man in the middle attack listening in on your conversation. Next, in the email, many people have started to implement more security in their email communication. And one way to do this is by using SMIME or SMIME. This is the Secure Multipurpose Internet Mail Extensions. It's a way that you can digitally sign and encrypt the information you're sending right in your email client. This is something that does have to be initially configured. It requires a PKI or at least a way to manage keys so that you're able to provide a public and private key to use in this SMIME communication. There is also a concern about the email as it's being transferred across the network. To address those, we have the protocols Secure POP and Secure IMAP, which take the existing POP3 and IMAP protocols and add SSL encryption on top of that network communication. And of course, you are communicating to your email inbox through a browser. You can simply use HTTPS using SSL or TLS to be able to encrypt the entire communication between your browser and the email server. Next is the web. Of course, all communication in your web browser can use the same form of encryption using SSL or what's now called TLS. SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer. TLS is the updated version of SSL, and that stands for Transport Layer Security. We usually see SSL implemented as HTTPS. This is HTTP over SSL. Usually you'll see HTTP secure, and you'll see in your browser there will be an HTTPS with a little lock next to it to signify that this communication is encrypted. SSL uses a combination of asymmetric encryption and symmetric encryption to be able to provide this level of confidentiality. It's able to transfer a symmetric key by using asymmetric encryption. And by using the asymmetric key, we can have a very fast and very secure communication between your browser and the web browser. Next is the file transfer. If you're transferring files, you don't want to use a protocol that will transfer the information in the clear. Instead, use an encrypted protocol such as FTPS. FTPS stands for FTP over SSL, just as we have HTTPS, which sends HTTP traffic over SSL. We have FTPS that does a similar function. This is a different protocol than SFTP. SFTP is SSH, File Transfer Protocol, which is also a way to transfer files over an encrypted channel, but it's using SSH instead of SSL. SFTP also provides file system functionality, so you can restore a file transfer if it's been interrupted. It can provide directory listings, remote file removals, and other file management functions by using this SFTP protocol. If you on a large corporate network, there may be thousands of users and hundreds of file servers and printers. One way to manage all of these different devices and keep everything in one central repository is by using the LDAP, or Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. This is a protocol that's used to read and write directory information over an IP-based network. LDAP uses a standard from the International Telecommunications Union called X.500. This means that we're able to use different types of operating systems and technologies, and they'll all still be able to talk to each other using this LDAP protocol. LDAP started as the Directory Access Protocol on the OSI protocol stack, and it was updated to make it more lightweight and to work with TCP/IP. And we have today's protocol LDAP. If you're using Windows Active Directory, Apple's Open Directory, or using Open LDAP, then you are using this LDAP protocol to be able to query and gather information about other devices that are on your network. One way to make LDAP more secure is by enabling LDAP, which stands for LDAP Secure. It's a non-standard implementation of LDAP that effectively uses LDAP over SSL. Another way to add security to an LDAP communication is to implement SASL. This is the Simple Authentication and Security Layer. SASL is a framework that allows you to take an existing protocol like LDAP and provide additional authentication and security to these existing protocols. So, if you're communicating to a device at a command line, then you probably don't want to use a telnet, which communicates in the clear. Instead, use SSH, which stands for Secure Shell. This is an encrypted terminal communication that looks exactly like a telnet communication, but all of the network communication back and forth between you and the other device is all encrypted. The original implementation of domain name services did not include any type of security. There was no way to verify if the information retrieved from a DNS server was legitimate. Because of that, the industry implemented DNSSEC. This is the domain name system security extension. This allows you to verify the responses that you're getting from a DNS server. You can make sure that it's really coming from the correct origin, and you can make sure the information that you're receiving is exactly what was sent from the DNS server. DNSSEC does this using public key cryptography. The records within DNS are effectively digitally signed by a third party. The signed DNS records are stored on the DNS server, and when you receive the DNS information, you can verify the digital signature. Next, if you're a network administrator and you need to manage a switch or router, you can communicate to those devices over a command line using SSH or secure shell. There are also ways to manage these devices using SNMP. And if you want to add security to that protocol, you would use SNMP version 3. This is the Simple Network Management Protocol version 3. It's this version 3 of SNMP that includes confidentiality. It encrypts the communication back and forth between you and that remote device. It adds integrity so you know the data was not changed as it went through the network. And we have authentication, which verifies the source of information. Some switches and routers also allow you to manage the device through a browser, and in those cases, you may decide to use the encrypted protocol for browser communication, the HTTPS. So the allocation of IP address can be done automatically using a protocol such as DHCP, the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, but DHCP does not have any type of security but built into the protocol itself. There is not a secure version of DHCP that you can opt to use in your environment. One of the biggest challenges with a DHCP is that someone could then start their own DHCP service and begin offering IP addresses as a raw DHCP server. In a Microsoft environment, DHCP servers must be authorized in Active Directory. So Microsoft has added an additional layer of security on top of the DHCP process. Some switches have operating systems that allow you to define a trusted interface in the switch. And if DHCP communication is coming from a trusted interface, then it's allowed to communicate through that switch. There are many manufacturers that have implemented this type of functionality. If you're using a Cisco switch, you'll see this referred to as DHCP snooping. Another security challenge that we have with the DHCP is that someone can spoof a MAC address and constantly request DHCP addresses from the DHCP server. This will very quickly cause the server to run out of IP addresses. We call this a DHCP starvation attack. This is another example where we can configure a switch to look for these particular situations, but it's very common to configure switch interfaces to limit the number of MAC addresses that could be associated with an individual interface on the switch. Next, a number of security applications and tools that we have on our network rely on subscriptions. Our antivirus and anti-malware application use a subscription to download and update their signatures. We have intrusion prevention systems on our network that are constantly updated through a subscription, and many of our firewalls have a list of known malicious IP addresses, and those databases are also updated through a subscription. One of the challenges that we have is each one of these different services uses a completely different method to provide the updates. One of the things that we can do from a security perspective then is to add additional security controls. Perhaps we can limit the IP address where these subscriptions might come from. Or if the application supports it, we can add additional security controls such as certificates to verify both sides of the conversation. So yeah, thank you.
The nature and execution of the dominant method of attack used against cryptosystem. But first, let us find out what is cryptosystem. A cryptosystem is an implementation of cryptographic techniques and their accompanying infrastructure to provide information security services. A cryptosystem is also referred to as a cipher system. Understanding more about cryptosystem, let us look into this illustration. The illustration shows a sender who wants to transfer some sensitive data to a receiver in such a way that any party intercepting or eavesdropping on the communication channel cannot extract the data. Let us discuss the components of cryptosystem. First, we have plain text. It is the data to be protected during transmission. Encryption algorithm. It is a mathematical process that produces a ciphertext for any given plain text and encryption key. It is a cryptographic algorithm that takes plain text and an encryption key as input and produces a ciphertext. Encryption key. It is a value that is known to the sender. The sender inputs the encryption key into the encryption algorithm along with the plain text in order to compute the ciphertext. Ciphertext. It is the scrambled version of the plain text produced by the encryption algorithm using a specific encryption key. The ciphertext is not guarded. It flows on a public channel. It can be intercepted or compromised by anyone who has access to that communication channel. Decryption algorithm. It is a mathematical process that produces a unique plaintext for any given ciphertext and decryption key. It is a cryptographic algorithm that takes a ciphertext and a decryption key as input and outputs a plain text. The decryption algorithm essentially reverses the decryption algorithm and is thus closely related to it. Decryption key. It is a value that is known to the receiver. The decryption key is related to the encryption key, but is not always identical to it. The receiver inputs the decryption key into the decryption algorithm, along with the ciphertext in order to compute the plaintext. 10. An interceptor or an attacker is an unauthorized entity who attempts to determine the plaintext. He can see ciphertext and may know the decryption algorithm. He, however, must never know the decryption key. Since ciphertext is not guarded and flows on a public channel, interception may happen here. This is where the attacker will be able to read the ciphertext. The interceptor can see the ciphertext. If the interceptor doesn't know the decryption algorithm, he will try to use any algorithm that he knows or solve for the decryption algorithm used in the ciphertext to determine the plaintext. Let us understand this illustration in the simplest way. For example, Bob once sent a message to Alice saying good morning. The plaintext good morning will not directly channel to Alice because if it does, the attacker will easily guess the private message that's sent from Bob to Alice since the channel is public and not guarded. Using encryption algorithm, the plaintext will be solved and converted to ciphertext using a specific encryption key. These are the example of ACII code of the letters good morning. So if my encryption key is just to add 3 to its ACII code of each letter, the ciphertext result will be like this. So the ciphertext will now JRRG PRUQLQJ. Therefore, the attacker will not easily guess the message. The ciphertext will be sent to the decryption algorithm. Encryption key and decryption key is similarly related but not identical. Encryption key added 3 the ACII code of each letter. Therefore, to convert it to plain text, the ACII code of each letter of the ciphertext will be subtracted to 3. That is what we call decryption key. The attacker can only see the ciphertext since it channels to a public channel and not guarded. The attacker will try to solve any types of decryption algorithm to guess what the ciphertext means. If he successfully guesses the algorithm, this is a really problem.
Cryptographic attacks. A cryptographic attack is a method of circumventing the security of cryptographic system by finding a weakness in a code, cipher, cryptographic protocol, or key management scheme. This process is also called cryptanalysis. There are dozens of different attacks that have been developed against different types of crypto systems with varying levels of effectiveness. In cryptographic attacks, we will be discussing only some of the common attacks. First is the brute force attack. A brute force attack uses trial and error to guess login info, encryption keys, or find a hidden web page. Hackers work through all possible combinations hoping to guess it correctly. The most common and easiest to understand example of brute force attack is a dictionary attack, to crack password. A dictionary attack. In this attack, an attacker simply tries to decrypt the message with each possible secret key and checks the result of the decryption to see if it makes sense. Given enough time, the computational resources, this attack is guaranteed to work since the true key has to be within the set of possible secret keys, and the attacker will eventually try it and hopefully realize that the resulting plaintext is the correct one. Next is the man-in-the-middle attack. A man-in-the-middle attack is a type of cyber attack where a malicious actor insert him/herself into a conversation between two parties, impersonate both parties, and gain access to the information that the two parties were trying to send to each other. A man-in-the-middle attack allows a malicious actor to intercept, send, and receive data meant for someone else, or none to be sent at all, without either outside party knowing until it is too late. A man-in-the-middle attack requires three players. In a picture, there's a victim, the entity in which the victim is trying to communicate, and the man in the middle who's intercepting the victim's communication. Critical to the scenario is that the victim isn't aware of the man in the middle. Also, this attack is active eavesdropping, in which the attacker makes independent connection with the victims and relays message between them to make them believe that they're talking directly to each other over a private connection, when in fact the entire conversation is controlled by the attacker.